Hello. We are now in January of 2019. My name is Paul Glumaz. Today is the 6th of January. And after 45 years of being in continuous combat for a different world than the one we've been getting, in all aspects, 2019 is going to be a year of revolution. And there's going to be a revolution in science and technology, which is ongoing, a revolution in economics, a revolution in diplomacy, and a revolution in how finances are done. And hopefully all of these revolutions will lead to a revolution in our own conception as human beings and what we can do as human beings, rather than the apathetic, demoralized condition that our population is currently in. This revolution is already going on internationally, and our job is to continue to bring this revolution into the United States. So I will start with the revolution that is going on in science and technology, and the attempts that are being made to try to stop that revolution. This revolution is taking off because China has been consistently moving forward in all areas of science, in all areas of technology, step by step by step. As they develop, as they industrialize, as they expand the industrial process to other nations through the Belt and Road, they have also been going for the advanced scientific frontiers. On those frontiers, at one time the U.S. was way ahead of everyone in the world, but now the U.S. is not promoting those frontiers, and instead the United States has stepped back from those frontiers. One of those frontiers is space. The United States basically shut down the space program after the moon shot, and they have not really had an orientation towards space. And then Obama basically cut off the funding, and pretty much ended the space program, except for a number of different aspects, but not the commitment to go back into space. And as a result, the U.S. right now depends on Russian rockets to get to the space station. And we used to have the best rockets, but we dismantled that capacity. We dismantled everything we had on that. Now, the Chinese just landed a rover on the far side of the moon. And there were a lot of revolutionary technologies that are going to come out of that in the form of materials manufacturing, because the rover is only 146 kilograms in weight. That's about 300 pounds roughly. That's what it is. That's not a lot. Okay, and they had to create new materials in order to have the strength at that weight. The second thing the Chinese did was they had the lander pretty much land on its own, based on its own telemetry and guidance systems, to let it know where to land and how to land and all of that. Because there's a 60-second delay, and this is very important that they develop that capability. But the more important thing is that this is only part of a process. The Chinese aren't just doing one shot there. This is the next rover is going to bring back samples from the moon, and then that completes the first stage. And then the second stage is to put a bunch of robots there to start constructing a lunar station, and eventually build a station an industrial facility on the moon that can mine helium-3. The helium-3 by that time would be available for fusion power. By that time, it is expected, well, 10 years or so, 15, 20 years from now, it's expected the helium-3 will become a very valuable source of fusion energy source. And when you do that, not only do you have fusion, but you have a kind of fusion which is much more stable. And at that point, you start to have a revolution in every area that we're in every area, from medicine to you name it. And that's not far off. That's within the lifespan of even someone like me, who, as I'm an early senior now, by the time this all happens, if the world is still here, I might still be alive to see it. This is a huge revolution that we're talking about, okay? And that's in that area, and fusion and space, and the two go kind of together, because your space program is also developing the technology which can be fed into the fusion program, and vice versa. There's also tremendous revolutionary developments going on in construction and methods of construction that are incredible. A bridge that might take 2 years here to build, that, like the viaduct, taking the viaduct down and building the tunnel. The Chinese are doing stuff like that in weeks. They're building bridges in 36 hours. They're assembling thousands of people to do this, but they're doing it. They're doing it quickly. And there's all kinds of innovative construction technologies that have been developed. There's also innovative technologies in agriculture. There's all kinds of technologies being developed in agriculture. And also, agricultural revolution is going to be going underway in Africa as the railways and the infrastructure is built up. Vast areas of Africa's agriculture will be available for the world, and also for the African population, that will dramatically increase their living standard. There's also a revolution the Chinese are now going into, which is what the attack on the communications, Huawei, which is about to become the front, take the lead in 5G technology. So this is a major telephone, cell phone company, but it's many other aspects to it. And this 5G technology is 10 times more powerful than, let's say, the 4G, and this allows for much more instantaneous communications and so forth. These are all areas that the Chinese are committed to moving forward in, and it's not, the way it's done is not a one-shot deal. It's step by step. It goes forward. There's also progress going on in nuclear reactors and development of modular nuclear reactors. This is the whole frontier of nuclear fission reaction, and that is to build these small modular nuclear reactors that can be mass produced. I think Russia's pioneering this, China's getting in on it, India's getting in on it. I don't know all the details, but modular nuclear reactors means that you can put one of these things in a small city, you can bring them in. There's a lot of discussion of modular nuclear reactors in the US, but the money isn't there, the funding isn't there, it's not going anywhere. However, one individual seems to have got caught on that we're entering a different world of science and technology, is none other than Bill Gates. And he is saying that he's going to devote the 2019 to nuclear power development, to funding nuclear power development. And so obviously Bill Gates is now picking up on the fact that the world that we're in right now is going to dramatically change in a very positive way potentially. Now, all of this is coming up against a massive attack coming from the European oligarchy and their environmentalist outlets, the mass media. This is coming under attack everywhere. And the core ideology that's still being promoted is that the world is overpopulated. That began in the 70s. But it's also the growth of mass propaganda around a climate change model, which swears that it's the increase of CO2 that contributed by human beings, which is the primary cause for the most threatening disaster of the earth. And Obama, if you recall, was considering passing legislation or making a law that anyone who denied that this interpretation and this computer model of climate change should be considered a terrorist and should be perhaps arrested and jailed for doing so. So this climate model, which is accepted by a lot of people, has a number of holes in it. There has a lot of holes in it that don't hold up. But nonetheless, it is what is being promoted. And this climate model basically says that if people continue to industrialize and increase their emissions of carbon dioxide, that they would that they are threatening the planet. And the whole idea, plus everything else that goes with it, is the idea that human beings are threatening the Earth, and you should feel guilty basically about being a human being on this planet, because look what you're doing to all these species, look what you're doing to the oceans, look what you're doing to the air, and on and on and on and on. We are bad and they are good, and we should feel very guilty for the fact that we might have a plastic bag in our apartment or something. This is propaganda, because if you can make a population feel guilty about their very existence, then you can do anything to them. You can get them to accept austerity. You can get them to not act on behalf of the population. You can break up any solidarity in the population that we're humans, we're workers, we need to improve our condition. You can break all of that. You can break all of that. So this is one of the key things that we're going to have to deal with, is this whole environmentalist, ecological, human beings are bad and everything else is good. Now, so this is going to be a year of a big fight around the issue of understanding the science of climate, the science of how human beings are and the atmosphere and everything else like that. And there are a number of areas. There's a number of areas which the standard climate change model that they use don't take into account. One is cloud formation. They have no way of dealing with how cloud formation, the role of cloud formation in climate. And they won't go there. And they'll even admit it that the model does not work in that respect. But the question is, how much does cloud formation affect the climate, affect the temperature, affects the reflection or absorption of solar radiation? And that is a whole nother world that they won't touch. They won't necessarily touch the fact that the expansion of CO2 in the atmosphere is largely a result of the warming and cooling of oceans, which is largely a result of the sun. They don't really do that. They tend to emphasize the contribution to human beings, which is only a small portion of that. So all of this is going to be an issue in this coming period, because you can't have people going for an industrial development and progress and all these new technologies. Oh, by the way, people who are for getting rid of fossil fuels also do not want nuclear power. So they want to basically strap you with solar, wind, and which does not have a lot of energy. It's not energy efficient. Now we have the revolution that's going on in diplomacy. In spite of all of the neocons and the neoliberals and their all these wars that we've been fighting all over the world, allegedly against terrorism, at the same time that we're actually financing terrorism. There's a lot going on in Syria, Afghanistan. There's a lot going on in the Middle East. Of course, you have North Korea, where a diplomacy is starting to emerge. And the reason diplomacy is starting to emerge is because Trump is not opposed to that. His chief of staff, his military is, the bankers are, the financial people are, all the people in government are opposed to it. They want to continue to keep the wars going. It's a huge economic system that ties in with the banking system and so forth. And also, it's where the Beltway gets most of its money. The people who work in the Beltway, but they want to continue the war, and Trump doesn't. So there's a lot of negotiations now going on, and the model of this, of course, is the Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un and the Singapore in Singapore and that process. There's a lot going on with Afghanistan, bringing countries together, bringing the Taliban and the government to negotiate. Syria, similar things are going on. And of course, there's still an effort to have false flags and to blow it up. Now comes the revolution in economics. Because if you're not going to have endless wars and you're not going to have all these things, you're actually threatening the financial system. And what do I mean by that? Well, the basis of the global financial system that we're in is instability. You have constant conflicts, constant regime changes, constant wars, constant divides, constant crisis points. What you do is it stops economic development. It stops the investment of credit into the real economy. And instead, it all flows into the offshore financial, to safe havens run under the City of London and Wall Street. So the whole financial system is predicated on maintaining instability all over the world. A good example of this is in the late 60s, early 70s, the collusion between the FBI and the banks and local law enforcement. They would redline certain areas, and then crime would move in, and those people would want to leave, and then that's how they drove people out into the suburbs, and they made a profit on real estate speculation. But because of this is how the urban sprawl developed. We have a mess. None of this was planned properly, and we ended up with people living a good chunk of their life in gridlock on the freeways because of a crime-driven real estate speculation. The same thing goes with this current system. It's all crime-based. It's all instability-based. It's all fluctuations in the wars and everything. It's the fluctuations in currencies are all tied to this. So if you are going to go against that, you're actually going to have a new system. And if everything is unstable and all funds end up in the casino and not in the real economy. So that's what we're saying. That's the essence of what Trump said when he said we spent $7 trillion at war in the Middle East. And, we can't build a bridge. We can't build a road. We can't build a railway. But that's what he means by that. That's what this meant. And of course, all the money spent in the war is also goes out of those areas back into the global finance. So that's $700 trillion. $7 trillion is also part of the global financial system. It doesn't stay in the U.S. It doesn't invest and develop the U.S. Now, all of this has been shattered by China's adopting of a Hamiltonian LaRouche model of economics, and which is being implemented through the Belt and Road, which I've talked about many times. So if you are ending the endless wars, you're going to have to put forward a new system. And that is key. And that's ultimately going to have to come about because that's the only way that you can have a win-win arrangement between the nations of the world. In fact, I'm sure some of this is going to be coming up in the negotiations between Trump and Xi Jinping. I mean, between China and the U.S. on the trade situation. Because what the offshore financial crowd and the British and Wall Street and the City of London want Trump to do is to beat up China and force them to open up to their system. And what Trump actually wants is jobs. He wants to get people back to work. So he can work out a deal with the Chinese for that. and that's why they're attacking China's Belt and Road, because they're afraid that Trump is going to work out a deal with the China, which is going to benefit the United States as well as benefit China. So China was never expected to have this kind of industrialization. There's also some significance on the fact that there's growing tremors going on. There's growing negative relations between Trump and the Federal Reserve. Trump is attacking the Federal Reserve because their policies are to keep the banks afloat, not to help the American people. So you have essentially a potential crisis between Trump and the Federal Reserve that could lead to Trump trying to to use presidential powers to override the Federal Reserve, and which would be very useful in the context of a financial collapse. Then you go into something very profound, which is now starting, which is not being reported in the U.S. press, which is incredible, is that the new president of Mexico, Manuel Andres Lopez Obrador, AMLO, who only came into the presidency December 1st, has announced earlier this week that all youth in Mexico are either going to be going to school, are going to be working, or are going to be working and going to school. And the money of 3,600 pesos will be provided to make sure that they do. Each student, each youth. This is huge. And he said he got his idea from studying what FDR did and putting similar millions of young people to work in these WPA camps and various other things that they did in building projects and reclamation. That this laid the foundation for the tremendous industrial transformation, because you now had the beginnings of skilled labor. So this is what he's calling upon. This is huge. This is huge. To have somebody doing what FDR did in Mexico on a mass scale and putting the young people in Mexico to work or into school. Can you imagine what this will do? This will have a big impact on immigration. This will have a big impact on everything. And this would not be tolerated if Trump were not the president. If Trump were not the president, they would have overthrown this guy even long before he would have said this. But this is also going to have a huge impact on the other Latin American countries. So this is very, very important. Another aspect of this is what's going on in all around the world with respect to China and the Belt and Road, except in Europe. There's a huge issue in Europe. But what all this means is that at some point, Glass-Steagall and the credit system will have to be done. And this is the revolutionary year where that's going to probably happen. Now, a lot more stuff is coming out on the British role, this integrity initiative. The British government was funding this operation starting in 2015 to intervene in all countries to create a new Cold War with Russia. And all the people that were involved in that are the people that were involved in the operation against Donald Trump. So the British role is becoming much bigger. And this is the British government role. And of course, the relations between the U.S. and Britain are declining. And this is very important. But Donald Trump has essentially, to some degree, consolidated. And now we're entering the period leading into the announcements for president that we have for presidential candidates. We're in 2019. The election is 2020. The pre-campaign begins, in this year, leading into the primary elections in the early part of next year, so this whole process of campaigning is now getting underway, and And in that context, the financial system is most likely going to collapse in that period. So these issues are going to be very big, and Trump is going to have to deal with this. But his situation is somewhat stabilized. So in that context, I think it's very important that we launch a massive effort to begin preparing for the implementation of Glass-Steagall and a credit system. Already the battle lines are being drawn on that. And the second major initiative is to go after the climate change, the operation against the economic development, against scientific and technological progress. So this is what the new year is going to look like, folks. It's going to be very intense. The Democratic Party is in a deep crisis. Most of the Democrats who got elected because they said that they weren't going to impeach Trump. The real rabid ones that were out to say that they were out to impeach Trump, they're not the ones that were elected because a large chunk of their voter base is Democratic, Trump supporters. However, that doesn't mean that the people who ran for office have any say and won their elections have any say in what goes on, because that's usually they're just there, and they're told what to say and they're told what to think. So those people are now confronted with the fact that there could very well be an all-out drive to remove Trump in this period, which will further exacerbate the tensions between the Democratic elected officials and their constituencies, whom they downplayed this whole thing in order to get elected. So you have that kind of crisis coming in the Democratic Party. But I do believe that there's a psychotic quality to the liberals, and they're now marching step in step with the neocons. The peaceniks now want to go to war because it's Donald Trump as president, and they were always saying Donald Trump was the guy who was going to get us in a nuclear war, and he's trying not to. And now they're attacking him for not being warlike. So you have all these contradictions emerging. But the key thing to understand is that we're dealing with a psychotic liberal establishment and an equally psychotic neoconservative establishment, and they've now pretty much merged into one psychotic kind of thing where they're going after China and Russia, they're going after Trump, they're going after progress and development. They're going after every and everything, and they're doing it in the most incoherent sort of way, and with the backing of the mainstream media. So this is what you're going to be getting in this period.